I am today announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
The most important words of my life.
I'm here tonight.
I stand
before you today
to declare that I am a candidate
for President of the United States of America.
I am running
for President of the United States.
I officially announce my candidacy
for President of the United States.
I'm running for president.
I am officially running
for President of the United States.
From the University of Virginia Center for Politics, this is Sabato's Crystal Ball, America Votes.
Welcome to our very special discussion with a very special guest who has a tie to the University of Virginia that is also special. This is a very special moment. Christopher Krebs is the director of the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. This is the government agency that monitors both internal and external threats to American elections. So that tells you immediately that it's been his busy season. And I'm sure many of you have seen him. He's been all over the place in the media, reassuring people and telling people what they needed to know. And now he's going to tell us the real story because he trusts his alma mater. So all the stuff that he couldn't tell the media will be right here. And you can't use it without our permission. Be with you in a second, Chris, and then you can correct that. Okay. Previously, Chris was Assistant Secretary for Infrastructure Protection. He's held a number of important positions within the private industry, including on Microsoft's U.S. government affairs team, where he led the company's U.S. policy work on cybersecurity and technology issues. Now, he holds a law degree from George Mason, but that's not important. The important degree was the undergraduate degree right here at the University of Virginia. And even more important, he took my class in the late 1990s, and he took his degree in 1999, and we're proud that he is an alum of the University of Virginia. Chris, we're so pleased that you're with us. I know how busy you are, and I want to get right into our questions. And the questions really start with, you had to plan for the unknown. What were going to be the security threats facing us in this election? What did you plan for, and what did it turn out to be?
So first off, Larry, thanks for having me on. And, despite your comments about George Mason Law, I do support most universities within the Commonwealth. And I have talked to Senator Warner about his support of admitting Virginia Tech to the Atlantic Coast Conference. And he said that that's probably the one issue that he lost the most voters over. So I think that's probably well-deserved, but nonetheless, great to be on with you here. So, we had a distinct advantage in preparing for the 2020 election, and that we really did have 4 years to prepare, to game out a number of different scenarios. And that is quite a difference in what the prior team had in anticipation of the 2016 interference from the Russians. They had a couple months. We had 4 years. So we took advantage of that time to really work through a number of different scenarios, but really started with trying to make sure that we had a foundational understanding of how the nation's elections work. And I think it's worth kind of reviewing that for a moment, in that the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, provides state legislatures with the authority to determine the time, place, and manner of election. So it really does devolve down through our federalist approach down to state governments and really truly executed at the local level. So we were a supporting role here, but we have significant capabilities to help out on the cybersecurity side as well as the physical security side. So as we work through, what all these elections are, how they work, our first order of business was making sure that we had strong relationships with the head election officials in all 50 states. And that was probably one of the first things we got out of the way. We set up an information sharing and analysis center, an ISAC, which brought all 50 states and thousands of jurisdictions together to share information on threats with our federal partners. And that includes the intelligence community, as well as law enforcement and the Department of Defense. And then kind of working from there, bringing all of the community, the cybersecurity community together and trying to say, okay, now that we understand how these elections work, what do we think bad guys, foreign actors might do to try to exploit these systems and attack our elections, either directly or to undermine the American people's confidence in the election. So again, we took a lot of time working through that, and I think we made a lot of progress. We made these systems more secure. And then March comes along, right, and COVID. And so COVID changed a lot about how elections were conducted in the United States. And that includes an expansion of absentee and mail-in ballots, some changes at the local polling stations with, personal protective equipment, baffles, things of that nature, reusable or one-use only pens. So as we worked through that, we understood that there were a number of different things we had to do equipment-wise and security-wise. So provided that, again, that support through a focused task force that brought in CDC and HHS. And then the last thing I think we really had to prepare for was more along the lines of what we call a perception hack. So there's real hacking where people get into systems, manipulate things, and try to achieve the outcomes they want. And then there's such a thing where you could claim a compromise, claim a hack, or even get something that's a hack that's insignificant, but then play it up where it's much, much bigger, again, with that concept of undermining confidence. So we really had to take all those things together and get as much information out to the American people as we possibly could. And I think that really culminated a couple of weeks ago with the launch of our rumor control page, CISA.gov/rumor control, where we could take all of these scenarios, deconstruct them, and provide the facts to the American people. So when you see all this disinfo, these claims of hacks or claims of manipulation, and it's a resource that's authoritative as far as we can, as far as we see it.
And in this era, it is really needed because on Twitter, which I'm on a fair amount, and Facebook and all the other.
You too? Yeah,
It takes forever. I mean, people from everywhere will ask you questions, and if you don't have an hour to devote to it, don't go on it. That's one thing I've learned. But I heard from others, not directly from you, that you all did a good job in tamping down rumors that were spreading without any real evidence. Can you think of one in particular that you're proud of having tamped it down before it spread even more widely?
Well, let me give you two that can show. The first one shows really the breadth of the foreign government or the federal government's support to elections and countering disinfo, and the second's more on the technical side. So a couple of weeks ago, I think you'll probably remember that there were some emails that were shooting out purportedly from the Proud Boys that were intimidating Democratic voters. And then that was a Tuesday. The following day, there was a video that was showing hacking again by the Proud Boys. So working with our partners in the private sector and the rest of the federal government, we were able to really distill down what was going on there, figure out who was doing it, and share that information with the American people in 27 hours. And I just think that's remarkable progress and really shows the commitment of the national security community to ensure that 2020 is the most protected, secured election in modern history. So that's the first example. We were able to take a number of the attributes of the email and the video, and then produce some content on the rumor control side. And then, I'm on Twitter a lot too, so I'll take down, the specific debunkers, as we're calling them, and I'll have a tweet or a tweet thread and really get it out there. And we see these things kind of go viral in a good way. But the second example is something that kind of popped over the weekend. There's this claim, specious at best, that there's some high-speed, high-technology CIA supercomputer and software called Hammer and Scorecard that's out there that's manipulating the votes in a nefarious way. And it's crazy, it's noise, it's garbage. And so we were able to pull together a rumor control as soon as this thing started popping on about Friday afternoon. I got it up on Saturday, and then I was able to kind of amplify it. And again, that was almost debunking in real time, which is just again a remarkable development in as we see it in innovation in government about how things can happen quickly with folks focused on the issue and really dedicated resources on a specific threat.
Chris, where did that come from? Do you know? You've been able to trace it down? Where did that rumor come from?
That's really kind of the problems with some of these things. I think on one, there was definitely one issue that popped up in some QAnon research community stuff. And then it goes through those channels, pops over into social media on Instagram and Facebook, and then on Twitter. So it is hard to really pinpoint down the pathology of these issues. False news can carry around the globe before truth's got its boots on, that sort of thing. So we try not to isolate it too much, but try to find the themes that are spreading, deconstruct them, and then, put the truth out there as best as we can.
On the Proud Boys example, Chris, did that actually come from the white supremacists, Proud Boys, or other associated organizations?
No, and that's on me for not mentioning that earlier. I said purportedly from the Proud Boys. It was actually the Iranians. The Iranians, some of their cyber actors had spoofed some emails, sent them around. They'd obtained some voter information in a couple states, used that information for effectively their mail merge, and send it out. We don't have a full list just yet, or kind of count on how many emails went out. But we do know in some conversations with the private sector and some of the consumer email platforms that they were able to sync a bunch of this stuff. So they didn't all get out there, but again, it shows that both the national security community and the private and public sectors working together can really truly accomplish a lot in not just the cybersecurity field, but in this defending democracy space.
I agree with you. I think that's critical, and really it's a paradox, really. If you talk about it too much, you promote it, and then it gets even more views, page views wherever, or Twitter or Facebook. But if you don't attack it and tamp it down, then it becomes part of the landscape.
Yeah.
How do you determine, what the right balance is, or is it just guesswork?
So, I'm a big fan of the sunlight's the best disinfectant against disinformation. I'm also a firm believer that you can't ignore these things. You're not just going to wish them away. So at least for us, where we sit at CISA, and as we advocate for these issues within the national security community, we've just got fantastic partners with Director Wray at the FBI, General Nakasone at NSA, and Cyber Command, and elsewhere throughout the intelligence community. When we come and say, look, this thing's out here, it's already spreading, it's gone mainstream. Let's knock this down as quickly as we can. And we've just gotten great support. So when we can get these public statements out there about whether it's the Iranians that are that are pushing these fake emails and fake videos, or it's some other theme that's emerging, like the hammer and scorecard. Again, for me, and this is, I'll use kind of a football saying here, but speed kills. So as soon as we can get out and just give the American people something to hold on to when they see these things, and think twice before sharing, and inform them maybe a little bit. And really what we're talking about is education, in raising the level of critical thinking, so that folks are more discerning when they come across information that might resonate just a little too well with their preconceived notions, and kind of, exploit their confirmation bias.
Yeah, that's always a problem. And I'm afraid it's become very much a part of our politics. Chris, obviously, I saw you on a number of TV shows. I saw you quoted in a lot of major articles. Did you find particular news outlets especially helpful in getting the word out? Was anyone resistant because you're part of the government, or did they accept this as a useful service of the government?
So we actually really focused on building good relationships with the media, even prior to the 2018 election, because we saw how the Russians, in part, were trying to seed disinformation with media so that they could amplify, to your point about amplification. So regardless of where you land on the spectrum, we wanted to work with you so that we could get a better understanding of how the newsrooms, how the producers, how the reporters were thinking about their own requirements and their thresholds and the things they wanted to talk about. So even, for the 2018, we ran a tabletop exercise. A lot of your senior executives might work through, executive tabletop exercises. We did one with the media. So we'd put them through scenarios. They'd ask us questions. We'd ask them questions. And then on election day in 2018, we actually had calls every 3 hours. We replicated that for the 2020. Again, we had a tabletop exercise. We had calls every 3 hours. We issued statements. And so we had these relationships. They knew how to work with us. They knew what to expect from us. And this was all part of our commitment to being transparent on election security issues. And that applies not just for the media, but our relationships with the Hill. I've played cybersecurity in general, but election security specifically in a nonpartisan manner, straight down the middle. And I think that's what the American people want. I think that's what they deserve. And, to your point, we've gotten pretty positive feedback all around. And like I mentioned in our little pre-call, I'm getting quoted on Senate floor about, some of the things that we've seen.
Which can be good and bad, but we won't get into that. Look, Chris, you say you called every 3 hours. Did you have a set group in the media that you called? Is that what you mean on a conference call?
Yep. So we had press calls with media partners from both the networks, from print media, from regional outlets. And it may have been 80 plus folks on those calls. And we were just able to walk through what we were seeing out there on the landscape. But to my congressional calls too, we were doing just general briefings every week for a number of weeks. And I've had probably at this point, half a dozen or more congressional hearings on election security issues. My staff's been up there briefing the various committees. I think we're well into the multiple dozens of briefings. So for us, it's all about information, transparencies, regular engagement. In fact, at the end of those calls on Tuesday, from a cybersecurity perspective, it was kind of boring. I mean, because we didn't have a lot to talk about, because the cyber activity on election day was very low, very, very low in terms of what we were seeing. And as I called it at some point, I think it was just another Tuesday on the internet.
Yeah. Well, that's a very
and that's
good
not
thing.
A bad thing. Let's be clear.
It's a very
That's
good
not
thing.
a bad thing
In this case. Somewhere, I think it was September. It's been just a blur, this whole campaign, but a senior government official, former Congressman Ratcliffe, announced that there had been 2 detected invasions of our system. I'm sure this came from your group, must have.
I was there. I was at the FBI headquarters for that press conference. Yep.
Wonderful. Tell us how he arrived at Iran and Russia. And he stressed Iran more than Russia. And I'd like to know whether both were true, and whether any additional countries have come into the mix since then.
Yeah, Larry, let me start with, is it true? Of course it was. Yeah, I wouldn't have been there if it wasn't true. When you break down those 2 activities and those 2 threat actors, Iran, we've already talked about those Proud Boy emails, or purportedly Proud Boy emails in the video. Again, that specific press conference you're talking about was on the Wednesday evening. The emails first appeared on Tuesday afternoon. So when I talk about 27 hours from first identification of those emails to sharing with the American public what was going on, that was 27 hours. And that was that press conference. It's been called a hastily pulled together press conference by a few. And you know what? It doesn't have to be pretty. We're just trying to get information out to the voters so they understand what's going on. So generally behind that, what happened was, A, we've got the emails and the videos, but B, there's a separate line of cyber activity where Iranian actors were able to get information, non-public voter information from a state system. It wasn't a hack in the full compromise of a system. There was a misconfiguration in a system that they were able to exploit and basically get a database to kind of spit out, or a website to spit out information. So we've investigated that. We continue to look for other states where they may be that sort of activity, but haven't seen that. On the Russian issue, Russia is a.
Can I ask one quick thing about Iran? Which state was it? Can you tell us that?
So we don't disclose victims. Okay. Ultimately, that's we have a confidential relationship with these states. All of my services. I'm not a regulatory agency. We don't have a mandate for state and locals. This is federalism, right? That's how our system works. I can't make a state do a single thing. So our relationships are public-private partnership, or in this case, public-public-private or public-public partnership. And I've got to have some sort of trusted relationship. So when they come to us and work with us, it's in a confidential nature.
No, that's fine.
So,
I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
So on the Russian activity, you got to keep in mind that Russia is outside of elections in general, really one of the most active cyber threat actors. They are constantly out there scanning, looking for opportunities to compromise systems of any nature, federal government, state, local government, election systems, education systems, colleges and universities, Larry, but also the private sector and banks and technology companies and all that. I could go on for hours here. But what we saw in this case was this broad scanning campaign by the Russians that started earlier in the year, that in one case, they landed in a county level network in a state, and they just kind of landed in a network that had election information. And it wasn't the database. They were not in the election or in the voter registration database. They were basically landed on a computer or on a workstation that a staffer had some kind of, best way to call it is like work product, like a mail merge or something for some postcards to go out. It was that sort of information. So we investigated, determined with the county that there was no further compromise. They were able to mitigate. So this, I don't call this one, in fact, an election security story. There is a nexus because they had voter information. This is a much broader cybersecurity story, and this is the Russian cyber actors being Russian cyber actors, and we've got to continue putting pressure on them to get them to change their behaviors.
It sounds to me, I agree with you 100% on that, but it sounds as though Russia kind of pulled back a bit after the 2016 results, which caused tremendous controversy. Now, whether they had anything to do with it is another question, but no doubt they didn't want to have that kind of intense criticism again. Did you get the sense that while they were constantly looking for opportunities, they were less inclined to use the information they were able to get?
Well, it's still unclear exactly what kind of information they ended up with more broadly. But let's also not kid ourselves here. We've got two runoffs happening down in Georgia that could determine the which way the Senate swings. There's still a certification process going on in all 50 states that could go anywhere from the end of this week well into December. Then there's the Electoral College. So I've said this a bunch and kind of got made fun of it for saying it so often, but we're not out of the woods yet on election security issues. So we remain guarded. We remain at an elevated cybersecurity protection posture. We'll continue to work with our state partners well into January. And so I'm not counting the Russians out just yet, just like I'm not, saying that the Iranians are done just yet, but working with our partners in the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, the FBI, we're pretty confident that we got things stacked up the right way and that, we were able to push back and deter them from taking action. But the most important thing here is that we remain confident that your audience, your viewers, their vote is secure, the count's secure, and the certification process is going to be secure. So this goes to that perception hack thing, where even if they did end up with some information, non-public voter information from a specific state, those systems don't touch the vote count, the vote certification process. So we'll keep an eye out on more of these perception hacks, more disinformation. You could see websites getting defaced or shut down, or claims that things have been hacked. And I think, everybody just needs to be on guard, know that they're trying to get in your head, undermine the confidence in the process.
That makes perfect sense. Chris, were there any other countries, did you get even hints, as opposed to proof, even hints that other countries were trying to do things to interfere with our elections?
Well, it's a pretty active landscape just in general in cybersecurity. So intent is not always immediately obvious. Scanning is just a technique that you'll see where any number of actors are just looking for vulnerable systems, and they're not, waving a flag saying we're on an election security mission here. So we continue to look at any number of activities over the last several months. We'll trace back to the extent we can to see if there's any election security nexus. Again, the systems have held up pretty well, but at this point, nothing to indicate that there's any sort of certainly material impact on the elections, but even approaching material where, it's a pretty slim pickings on activity.
Of course, there are non-state actors too that may not be connected to any government or receiving funding from them. How in the world, given the proliferation of the technology that can be used for this, how in the world do you keep tabs on what must be hundreds of groups?
Yeah, and they're constantly changing. Ransomware, cyber criminals and ransomware are a thing that we're actually probably most concerned about right now once you step out of the election security space. Even though ransomware could be a threat to election security systems, ransomware is that thing that I suspect every one of your viewers or listeners has had some kind of community-based experience with, whether it's the city of Atlanta, the city of Baltimore, Colorado, Louisiana has been popped a couple times, Texas, everywhere has had some kind of issue with ransomware. So we're working with the rest of our federal partners, but as well with our private sector partners to get better security systems out there, a more secure deployment. But it's tough. State and local government in particular is really susceptible to these sorts of ransomware attacks because just the legacy equipment. What I mean by that is you've got, in some cases, operating systems that are 10 to 15 years old, Windows XP, things like that, Windows 7. It costs money to get on the latest modern platforms, both from a software and hardware perspective. And the money's not always there. And one of the things that does worry me is that the way that COVID and some of the stay-at-home and shutdown orders over the course of the spring and the summer are really going to impact tax revenues. And those tax revenues, that's what helps state and local communities and government agencies upgrade equipment, pay salaries. You could see furloughs. So we're gonna have some challenges in front of us that we're going to need to head off.
Well, it's a never-ending job, and we're glad you're on the job, Chris, because it's obvious you have a command of the challenges, and also because you're a University of Virginia graduate. So that just means you're at the top of the game, whatever the game is, right? Class of 99, class of 99. And it was commerce. Weren't you in commerce?
No, I was an environmental science grad.
Environmental science,
a little bit of science there, yeah.
That's right. Well, I'm delighted you got that too. Hey, Chris, anytime we can be of help to you, please let us know. This was so informative, and this goes to lots of people. So I think they'll have a chance to get a better sense of what you've been doing. And whatever you did, it must have worked, because my sense is there was a lot less chaos than we expected, given COVID, anything else that was going on. So congratulations to you and to your colleagues. And we appreciate the work that you've done.
Hey, thanks, Larry. Look, when you got 4 years to prep for something, that gives you time to get everything lined up. So, the one last kind of parting shot I have here is a playback to what I mentioned earlier. So right here, if you see it, CISA.gov/rumor control, or you just go to your favorite search engine and type in rumor control, and it should be the first result. Check it out. It's got a lot of information on what's going out there related to election security and election administration. So if you see things that just don't sound right, claims being made, all over the place, check it out. See what you can find. Also, you can check out my Twitter. I tend to be pretty prolific these days, and that's CISA Krebs. So, Larry, thanks again for the opportunity to speak with you and your viewers.
It's wonderful to reconnect with you, and we'll be back, no doubt. You stay in touch with us when we can help. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.